How does a director work? When he's going to shoot a film or a television show, how does he start his preparations? When he looks through the script, what is he looking for? When he starts to work with the production designer, designing the set, what do they discuss? And when the actors arrive, and for their first reading, what is the director listening for? Then when the time comes to go out onto the studio floor, where does he put the actors in relation to the camera? How does he plan the camera coverage? Well, the first thing to say is that there are no rules, absolutely none. Because no two directors work the same way. Indeed, the same director working on a different subject will work differently. But having said that, what I'm going to try to do now is to take you through the thought processes of one particular director, myself, as he works on one particular subject. The facility that we've got here is a sound stage at the California Institute of the Arts. It's equipped with 3 videotape cameras and the control room back there, where the shots from these 3 cameras can be switched in real time, switched live, so to speak. This sort of multiple camera coverage used to be the standard procedure for all television production when television was mostly live. But with the invention of new equipment for videotape editing, more and more these days, they're working with what they call ISO cameras. That is, each camera has its own tape deck. So that, in fact, there are 3 tapes in there, and we can edit those afterwards, as you do in film. But for us, of course, the real advantage of this facility is that it's an absolutely marvelous teaching instrument. We can demonstrate here immediately for the students the principles of what we call film grammar, meaning the sizes of shots, the screen sizes, the eye lines, the axis, the camera movement, and so on. And they can edit it as an experiment in the language of the cinema. More of that later. The text that we're going to be using today may seem to you an odd choice. I've picked it because I've been reading a little book here by Peter Brook, who's an old friend of mine, the English director. Peter has worked successfully both in film and in theatre. This is mostly about theatre. And here he's discussing the difference between dialogue as it is written for performance on the stage and as it is written for the screen. It's a point very relevant to what we were talking about earlier. How does a film director read a script? What is he looking for in the script? Well, Peter has chosen here an exercise that is from Shakespeare. It's from Romeo and Juliet, a fairly well-known scene in blank verse and very theatrical and poetic, of course, not written for the cinema. Peter Brook's exercise involved a scene from Shakespeare, and we've got a couple of actors here to help us in the reading. This is Murphy Cross, Matt Landis. The scene is a very famous one, famous to the point of being really a cliché. But let's start simply by reading it. It's the Romeo's farewell to Juliet. Off you go.
Wilt thou be gone? It is not yet near day. It was the nightingale and not the lark that pierced the fearful hollow of thine ear. Nightly she sings on yon pomegranate tree. Believe me, love, it was the nightingale.
It was the lark, the herald of the morn, no nightingale. Look, love, what envious streaks do lace the severing clouds in yonder east. Night's candles are burnt out, and jocund day stands tiptoe on the misty mountain tops. I must be gone and live, or stay and die.
Yon light is not daylight, I know it I. It is some meteor that the sun exhales to be with thee this night a torch-bearer, and light thee on thy way to Mantua. Therefore stay a while, thou shalt not go so soon.
Let me stay here. Let me be ta'en and die. I am content, so thou wilt have it so. I'll say yon grey is not the morning's eye, 'tis but the pale reflex of Cynthia's brow. I'll say it is the nightingale that beats the vaulty heaven so high above our heads, and not the lark, the messenger of morn. I have more care to stay than will to go. Come, death, and welcome. Juliet wills it so. What says my love? Let's talk. 'Tis not yet day.
It is, be gone. Fly hence, away to the lark that sings so out of tune, straining harsh discords and unpleasant sharps. Some say the lark makes sweet division. This doth not so, for this divided us. Some say the lark and lo the toad changed eyes. I would now they had changed voices also. They had changed voices too. since arm from arm her voice does not affray, hunting thee hence with hunts up to the day. So now be gone, more light and light it grows.
More light and light, more dark and dark our woes.
Thank you. Well, Peter's exercise was that the actors should then select only those words that they could play in a realistic situation and they play unself-consciously as if in a film. The actors then play the same scene like a genuine scene from a modern play full of living pauses, speaking selected words out loud but repeating the missing words silently to themselves to find the uneven lengths of the silences. This fragment of a scene would have made a good cinema, for the moments of dialogue linked by the rhythm of silences of unequal duration in a film could be sustained by close shots and other silent related images as in a film. So let's go again, and I want you simply to read, as suggested here, inside your head the lines that are poetic, and out loud the lines that would be the normal sort of speech. Let's go.
Wilt thou be gone?
I must be gone and live, or stay and die.
Therefore stay a while. Thou shalt not go so soon.
Let me stay here. Tis not yet day.
It is, be gone. More light and light it grows.
Thank you, fine. Well, so much for poor Will Shakespeare. What's happened to all this marvelous language? Nothing left here but the lines that are bald and banal. But remember, this was Peter Brook's idea. Peter, who has directed some of the most impressive productions in London and with the Royal Shakespeare Company. And we'll come back to this text later. But what have I really achieved by this? What have I got left? Well, what we have here is the basic action of the scene, not what the characters are saying to each other, but what their intentions are, what they are doing. Look at what's left here, and you'll see that the lines that remain are the key lines of what happens within the scene. What do I have to show? What do we have to see? 1, it's dawn and there's daylight coming up. 2, Romeo and Juliet are in bed together. 3, Romeo is preparing to leave, and Juliet wakes and pleads with him not to go. And Romeo, affectionate, points out that if he stays, he's liable to get killed. And Juliet, a little insensitively, says, well, stay a little while. So what does he do? He says, all right, calls her bluff, let's stay and I'll be killed. And Juliet panics. These are the steps which I have to state in front of the camera so that we can see these things happening. Because film tells its story in terms of images, not just words. It's very simple, it's very basic, and we've stripped the scene down to its fundamental images of action. Have I abandoned the dialogue? No, I'll come back to that. Bob Benedetti, who teaches directing in the School of Theatre here, wrote an article a little while ago for a magazine of theatre in which he said that if he and his production designer had really properly designed the layout of this stage set, if they had put together the geography of the performing areas, then he found that when the actors arrived, the play began to direct itself. I think what he meant was that the actors began to discover his intentions from the way he had planned the scene. Well, I've been talking to a designer, production designer, a student here from the CalArts School of Theatre, and she's prepared some sketches for me. Coming from theatre, they are theatrical scenes. They're conceived as from the point of view of the audience looking at the proscenium. But in fact, she's given me something really very much more useful to me, which is a plan of the studio floor here. I have a model, a miniature of the studio floor. It's to scale. These are 4-foot squares. Also, a set of camera angles. This represents the widest angle we can get on the zoom lens here. It's quite wide. At a distance of about 4 feet, it can hold a width of 8 feet. 8 feet wide, that will give us about a height of 5.5 to 6 feet, a long shot of a full-length figure. And these are narrower angles. These are the long focus angles that we use for closer coverage on each side of the master here. So these make it possible for me to think not in the single point of view of a scene in theatre, but in the multiple camera point of view, the camera shooting in this direction and then the reverse angle shooting in the other direction and so on. And also to scale, I have some of the elements that we'll have in the set. This is Juliet's bed and the window piece. Well, to start off with, here are the cameras. One thing I've noticed, that the student often takes for granted some things that I might question before I accepted them. These 3 cameras, for example, they're all lined up in a row, shooting in this direction. Well, the student assumes that therefore the set will be over here. What shall we put? We need Juliet's bed and the window frame. Put the bed here, shall we say? Okay. And the window frame over there, next to it? Okay. Let's see how that looks. Okay. I can see a problem here. The cameras, obviously the master camera has to be moved back over there. And these 2 cameras, we'll move them out there and there. The master camera, incidentally, is the camera that takes the whole scene, all of the principal elements in the same frame. It shows the whole environment, the setting, the relationship of the figures to each other. That's what a master shot is, an establishing shot. And we've taken this camera and we've moved it back to here. That's so that if we put the window frame there and the bed there, this master shot can hold them both in the same angle. And these 2 other angles, these long focus angles, these I put on each side of them. So I've shifted them around like this, so that this one shoots across in that direction for closer coverage of a character who might be standing over at the window there, and this one here for closer coverage of somebody who might be standing beside the bed. Note that all these 3 cameras are on this side of the line between those 2 characters. They're on this side of what we call the axis. And by angling this camera here, I'm getting on a figure over there, a 3/4 view, a 3/4 profile. A 3/4 profile in close-up or in close shot is one of the basic shots in the vocabulary of the cinema. It's the ideal cut closer from a master shot. This master shot, for example, that will give you an image like this. The 2 characters will be seen, if they're looking directly at each other, they'll be seen in profiles. This one looking off camera left, this one looking off camera right. Master shot, 2 profiles. But then the closer angle from over here, the 3/4 view, will give you a close shot something like this. And here, note that we can just see the faraway eye. And then from this angle here, on the opposite side, the close shot over there is like this. It's a matching close shot, 2 complementary angles. Here in plan is the setup, master, close shot, close shot. This diagram illustrates what is probably the standard formula for camera coverage in both movies and TV. It's as commonplace as in verbal language, the verb, subject, object. It's, if you like, the subject, the close shot, the verb, the master shot that shows the interaction, and the object, the other character over there. Indeed, nowadays there are a few directors, particularly in Europe, who regard this as so much the conventional formula, so typical of the Hollywood or commercial movie making, that they try to avoid it. You must make up your own mind about that. Besides, it can be varied in a number of ways. For example, supposing I want a greater feeling of intimacy. I can achieve that by taking the close-up cameras and pulling them round to shoot more frontally. These two angles should be complementary. Let me draw these for you. I do these little diagrammatic setup sketches all the time. A director doesn't need to be an accomplished draftsman, but it can be an enormous help if you pick up the knack of making very primitive, very elementary scribbles that show the framing and the screen sizes and the looks. Perhaps I should also demonstrate that on the cameras out there. Let me show you what I mean. It makes quite a difference. When I'm over here, the look to the other camera is there. It's a 3/4 profile, so. But supposing I move the camera over, the eye line is narrower. Or take it even further, move it into here. That's really quite frontal. The same thing in this direction. So the look back there is very narrow to the lens. The screen size and the eye line are the two factors that the director uses to emphasize the personality of the actor. But these two characters are still the same height. What happens if you've got two characters not the same height, or indeed if you've got somebody over here who is standing? Because this camera is at eye level, at my eye level, normal height, I appear to be looking below camera when I look down. So that means that we have to take this camera and take it down. And that way our eyes seem to make eye contact. We seem to be looking directly at each other. But supposing Juliet is sitting down here, and she's looking up. Her eye line, you see, is quite high above the camera over there. That means that we have to take that camera and lift it up higher so that it shoots closer to this sloping axis. And so the eye line is closer to the axis. Fine. Let me look at this for a moment and think. I'm beginning to think over again this whole problem of the axis. And I'd like in a way to start again. Start not assuming that both of the pieces of furniture are over like that. So let me tackle it the way I might. When I walk onto a set, usually I don't assume where the cameras are going to be in the middle of the floor. I get the cameras off the floor entirely and stack away. Let's put them over there. All right, cameras out of the way. I'm not thinking of the cameras at the moment. I want to rethink this question of the axis. Let me start again. In fact, let me go back to the plan of the studio. The longest axis in this particular area is the diagonal in the studio, isn't it? I think it might be more interesting to do some of the staging to that axis. In other words, a line that goes straight from there to there along this diagonal. And what I think I'll do is that I think I'll take these two elements, the bed and the window, and stage them on that particular line. I'll put the window down there and the bed back there. We see how that works. It means I can shoot along the diagonal. Down there I can get a full-length figure and show the whole of the set. I can frame figures in the foreground here in medium shot. I can also work from down here. I can put a master camera in this position, shooting along the axis in this direction and on this side of the axis. Or indeed, if I like, I can shoot from right outside. I can move a camera outside here, shooting back on figures in the foreground. So long focus camera here, shooting over in that direction, master camera in the middle, the other long focus camera shooting back in this direction. Fine. Another point to notice is that the master camera, which is over there, and the close-up camera, which is close beside it, they're in a position where the close-up camera is slightly on the inside, that is closer to this axis than the master camera. The point of that is that when we're cutting from a master shot that shows two characters to a closer angle of one of them here, you see more frontally. That is, the eye line is closer to the lens in this particular camera. You're showing the audience more of what it wants to see. It's easier perhaps to explain that by showing you setup sketches over here. The master shot, a figure in the foreground, so, by the bed perhaps. He, say it's Romeo, is looking off towards the girl in background. She's seen full length. Now we want to cut closer. We want to cut to a close shot of this part of the scene. We do that by switching to the longer focus angle, the camera that is next to the master. But because it is nearer to the axis, it will be like this. Slightly different eye line, closer to the lens. As you see, when we cut closer, we come round more frontally to the face, showing more of what we want to see. Oddly, this usually makes the cut seem smoother because it follows the desire of the audience to see more of what it wants to see. Good. Well, now the environment is taking shape. Now, in fact, I think we can go back to discussing the text, which we laid aside for a while. You remember that we charted out the various steps. Let's begin to think in terms of the performances. Over the years, I've worked with a number of actors and taken great pleasure in watching good actors at work. Actors are vain. They have to be. The attention and admiration of an audience is what an actor lives for. And without a live audience in film, that's what the director supplies. The director is in fact a kind of stand-in for the audience. That means that when the actor does something marvelous, the director warms his enthusiasm. And when the actor does something that isn't quite so good, you dim your enthusiasm a little bit. And the actor needing your attention adjusts. It's a form of emotional blackmail, if you like, but it's in a good cause. That's really what I should have told the student who asked, how do you get actors to do what you want? Well, heaven help me, I'm no actor. But I've discovered that, in fact, as a director, although I may not have the skills of an actor, I've got to develop the imagination of an actor. I've got to be able to think like the character. That's something that I do mostly on my own, really, obviously, in preparation at home when I'm lying in the bath and thinking about the story and the characters, or before you go to sleep. That's a good time, when you daydream and your unconscious gets to work while you sleep. But mostly, really, I do it at this stage where the set is beginning to develop and where I'm beginning to realize the performing area in which the characters will live, the behavior of the actors. And that's when I begin to think about who goes where. For example, over here, Romeo and Juliet. Who sleeps on the outside and who on the inside? It's my impulse to think that maybe Romeo sleeps there, because at the back you'll be able to watch the dawn coming up, and that's the story. In which case, if he wakes first, he'd have to get out at this side of the bed, at the end of the bed over here. So, in fact, I could pick him up, getting out of bed here, like that. That's good. Looking off towards the window in that direction. That means, in fact, a good idea, it seems to me, would be that I take the camera over here and begin on the shot of the window and pull back to include Romeo. So, with the girl here. I'd like to see the girl too. So that means, indeed, I have to pan the camera around in this way to see her. Or maybe he should move round. Maybe he goes starting here and he walks round. You know, the only trouble with that is that he's really more anxious about the window. He wants to go straight to the window to look out. So why does he move around here? If that is that crabwise movement, it's a rather artificial movement. I need something to motivate, something to give him a plausible move in this direction. The moves of an actor on the stage are, in the first place, they've got to look natural, so there's got to be some reason for him to go from here to there and so on. And I, as a director, have to find means to suggest that this is why you make that move to this particular position. A position, incidentally, that's useful for me in knowing where I put the camera to show the scene. Which brings me to the subject of props. Props. Props are terribly important from the director's point of view. They are the things with which he really controls the behavior of the actor on the stage. And in contemporary theatre or movies, very often there are the things like the ashtray, the mirror that the hostess goes to fix her hair in, or the bowl of flowers that she rearranges, the drinks on the sideboard and so on. But this is a period film, period story. So really, what are the best props here? The best props obviously are connected with what he's doing. They're his activity, he's dressing. So his clothes. Where shall I place his clothes around here? Well, there are the chairs too. Over here I have the chairs. I can put things on chairs. Where shall I put them? Let me take that chair and put it over here. Good. That means that I can take his shirt as if he'd taken it off and left it over here. And that gives him a reason to move over in this direction on his way towards the window. No, wait, maybe his boots, because if you have to get out in a hurry, better get your boots on first than your shirt. And he takes his boots over here to look out of the window so. Very cautious, seeing here. Then sits here, put his boots on. This way he's facing back towards the girl. Perhaps that's the point at which he wakes up. The rest of the things here, his doublet, his dagger and so on, I can put on here. That means they're on the way as he leaves, as he goes out. Okay, fine. Now, gradually I'm beginning to see the props, the furniture, making the moves, and the scene is coming to life because of the disposition of these elements. It's not just a movie set, a lot of flats in a soundstage that I'm building here. Inside my head, in this bone cassette, I'm building something much more subtle, much more elaborate. I'm trying to build a whole time and place, the place of the Renaissance, of the families of the Montagues and the Capulets feuding. As I look out there, I'm trying to, like an actor, I'm trying to feel it with all my senses, not just what I see out there where the sun will be rising in the east, but the wind that comes through here. That's the wind that comes before the dawn. I feel it. I can see it and feel it, and it comes alive to me and really solid. As I watch over there beyond the river, that's Montague country. I'll be safer over there. And then the monastery, where the bells in the bell tower that I can see will be ringing soon to call the people to early morning matins and to confession of the sins of the flesh. What I'm looking for indeed is Capulets. As I think of this, I realize something that perhaps I missed when I was just listening to the actors reading the Shakespearean blank verse. I'm thinking that it's romantic in tone, but how romantic is Romeo at this particular moment? What he's looking out there for is something much more specific. It's the Capulets that are a deadly danger to him. So that color arrives. There was one man who was here before me, of course, that was Shakespeare, who had to build all this world beyond these walls here and make it real because that was the prompting, the things that brought the words to his mind. And so as I look out here, I know that there's a note of fear, there's a color in the language, which makes it much more exciting. This blocking, this staging of the positions of the camera and the movements of the actors is rather like the planning, the blocking, if you like, that a muralist does, a painter, when he does the black and white sketch, which is the basic illustration of the figures within the composition, telling the story. That is squared off and put up on the wall. And then he really begins to paint. He puts in the colors. Colors, in the jargon of the actor, are the variety of the spectrum of emotions and feelings that underlie the dialogue, the colors of emotion that go into the scene. Earlier, if you remember, I said that some directors prefer to leave the interpretation of the scene and the meaning of the lines until this stage when the set is available and the props and so on, and they can rehearse with the actors. That's what I'm doing now. I'm preparing for the arrival of the actors so that they can get the feel, the palpable feel of the scene from the way the properties and the layout and so on is gradually growing in the imagination. There are several colors here, as I mentioned, that I hadn't really noticed before. First, fear, as we said, because Romeo, he's no coward, but the danger out there is very real. And there's desire, too, because he's passionately in love with the girl. He wants her very much indeed. He's fallen in love with her and means to get her out of here. And also even maybe a little guilt, because she's only 15, and the excitement began perhaps with the idea of seducing the daughter of his family's worst enemy. But there are other colors too. When he comes back here and teases the girl, he's really making fun of her. There's a slight sense of humor. And what about the girl? Here, she sees him awake and she goes over to him, to ask him, "Wilt thou be gone?" over here. She's not really being very sensible. Why? Well, come to think of it, she's half awake and she's only 15. And the experience, her first night with a man, is probably so overwhelming that all she can feel is the sensual touch of him, that she doesn't want to let him go. Romeo, who woke earlier and has been thinking about this, Romeo's mind is a good deal sharper on other matters. This tension between the softness and warmth of the bed and the girl's body over there and the sharp knives that are waiting for him out there. This is what he means when he says, "I must be gone and live or stay and die," and moves back for his shirt over here. That's the new move, a new dramatic move, and he moves on it. And we see that from this camera over here. We see him crossing, moving right to left, which reverses the screen directions. Juliet is on the right and Romeo's on the left. That means that I can begin to think in terms of a different axis. We've been shooting from over there, on that side of this axis here, but now I think I might move over in the other direction. I might in fact take the master angle here and move it right round to here. So, now I am in the position, if you remember we talked earlier at the beginning, where we have a camera photographing a figure in the foreground and somebody, Juliet, over at the window there beyond. That seems better. This is where she comes back to him and she says the stuff about torchbearer to light thee on thy way to Mentor and all that stuff. And he's teasing her really. He says, "All right, so let's go back to bed. Let's see how you'd move." What he might do is he might take her so and pull her back. Perhaps he plays the feminine role, pulls her down on top of him so we frame him here. And she, on the other side, is bent over him. But for that, obviously, the right position for the master camera is over here, panning down with him onto the bed. The long focus, closer camera will have covered her coming up. And as they move down onto the bed here, we get to a position here. And now I see a problem. Now the difficulty is that, as I mentioned earlier, if we want close-ups, if we want a close-up down on him, and I think we probably do, and a close-up on her, shooting this way here, we're on this sloping axis that we were talking about. That means that I have to take one camera and put it low behind the bed, and the other one and raise it up on a platform here. I need the close-ups because this is the moment when Juliet panics and comes suddenly to awaken to her senses. Why? What is it that alarms her? Perhaps it's something that she gets from Romeo. Perhaps when he's here holding her, he hears something in the distance, a noise from outside, maybe that bark of a dog in the distance. And he going tense, and she feels it. And being so close to him, she is suddenly terrified and drags him to his feet, be gone, etc. And so she dashes for the doublet and the dagger over there and pulls over him after her. And we follow that from the camera over there as they go to the window for the last lines. That seems to be working out. So gradually the scene is fully blocked. I may have given you the impression that I've worked out everything so carefully that I know where every camera angle is going to be and exactly where to tell the crew to put the setups or the actors where to move. If that's so, I've misled you, because indeed all these are just tentative decisions. I'm exploring the options that are available. I'm always ready to adjust as the actors come on the set, because they may have better ideas, or ideas that feel more comfortable and natural to them, and that's what matters. Filmmaking is a battle of a kind. Like any battle, you have a battle plan, but the plan you know is going to come up against obstacles and problems that you have to cope with, or indeed opportunities that you can seize. So there's no real contradiction between planning carefully and improvisation. The director is always improvising. Where did I start this scene? Over here. Remember when we were rehearsing with the actors over there, when we were reading the scene, we read it in two versions. We read it first with the full Elizabethan text. Shakespeare's plays, if you remember, were performed in open daylight, and that's why he had to create the atmosphere, create the images with the words. And then we read it in the other version, in which, as Peter Brook suggested, we should leave only those key lines which motivated the actors' moves, and I've been using that version for the staging of the scene. So let's play that version first, and in the silences, the uneven silences, which Peter Brook suggests are sustained with close shots or with related images. A related image, for example, might be the point of view shot in which Romeo and Juliet are looking out there and seeing the misty mountaintops and all that. In those silences, we'll let you hear the actors' inner voices. Let's look at that first. But the debate that Peter Brook was proposing was between the dialogue as it is written for the stage and dialogue as it is written for the cinema. What of the other? What of television? Well, at this stage in its evolution, television is really a compromise between the two. There are some who say it's the worst of both worlds. But because of the circumstances under which the television is usually watched in a domestic environment with other lights and other distractions around, the relationship between the sound, which does fill the room, against the image, which is relatively small, is such that the words carry more of the meaning. So it's nearer the stage in that respect. And let's see this again with the full dialogue text. I'm carrying on, waiting a bit here. Okay, cut. So let's see the latter part of the scene now. Let's see it first in the edited version, the shorter dialogue. Okay, now let's play it with the full Shakespearean text. You'll notice one thing. In the editing we find that the master shot is better for covering the dialogue. The close-ups are still used, but they're used as punctuation. It's better to have a third-person point of view when you're hearing the words, and when you have close-ups, the close-up is sometimes too close for dialogue. When you can see and feel the expression behind the eyes, you don't need the words to express them as well. It becomes redundant. That, I think, indeed was the point that Peter Brook's experiment was really making. Okay. Cut. How was it?
Be gone. It is not yet near day. It was the nightingale and not the lark that pierced the fearful hollow of thine ear. Nightly she sings in yon pomegranate tree. Believe me, love, it was the nightingale.
It was the lark, the herald of the morn. Oh, nightingale. Look, love, what envious streaks do lace the severing clouds in yonder east. Night candles are burned out, and Jock and Day stands tiptoe on the misty mountaintops. I must be gone and live or stay and die.
Yon light is not daylight, I know it, It is some meteor that the sun exhales to be with thee this night, a torchbearer, and light thee on thy way to Mantua. Therefore stay a while. Thou shalt not go so soon.
Let me stay here. Let me be ta'en and die. I am content, so thou wilt have it so. I'll say yon grey is not the morning's eye. 'Tis but the pale reflex of Cynthia's brow. I'll say it is the nightingale that beats the vaulty heaven so high above our heads, and not the lark, the messenger of morn. I have more care to stay than will to go. Come, death, and welcome, Juliet, wills it so. What says my love? Let's talk. 'Tis not yet day.
It is. Be gone. Fly hence, away to the lark that sings so out of tune, straining harsh discords and unpleasant sharps. Some say the lark makes sweet division. This doth not so, for this divided us. Some say the lark and lo the toad changed eyes. I would now they had changed voices too, since arm from arm her voice does not affray, hunting thee hence with hunts up to the day. So now be gone.
Shakespeare wrote that in 1595, nearly 400 years ago. But drama, theatrical storytelling, is even older, 2,500 years at least. So cinema is, in contrast, a youngster. I remember running away from high school to see movies that were silent. And when the talkies arrived, I was a student at an art school. Television, as I remember, came along after World War II. And since then, the technology has been changing at a dizzying rate. It leaves old-timers like me quite bewildered. It's all electronics now. But the language of the cinema, this use of camera angles and eye lines and editing and camera coverage, all that was really established quite early in the days of the silent cinema. And since then, the language has been evolving. As we said, there are no rules because it's always new. Each director who comes along finds a new form for himself. And so you as youngsters, you'll have to find your own methods. So, good luck to you.